This episode is a mission to provide you some insight on effective communication, managing stress for your success, and how to manage your time more effectively. All in an effort to make you a more productive, happy, and successful lawyer. And who else to better shed a light on these matters other than Amy Castos, who is a coach and mentor to lawyers and former investigations officer at the Legal Services Board. And make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. So having worked as a senior lawyer and an investigations officer at the Legal Services Board, what made you transition into more of a coaching and mentoring role for lawyers?
Well, when I tell people about the change in career that I've chosen, they say to me, wow, that's really different. But in the end, there are quite a few similarities because the reason that I went into law was to help people, and coaching and mentoring is about helping people too. So at the crux, there's a few similarities, but it's just the vehicle that you use to go about it. So I really enjoyed the law, and obviously working for the legal regulator, I was in a position to use the law to help consumers of legal services in terms of investigating complaints and making sure that lawyers were providing quality legal services. But I felt like I wanted to make a more direct impact in some way, because obviously with a corporate body, even though it's a government body, you're limited in how much help you can give. So I thought to myself, what can I do to make a more direct impact? And I thought coaching and mentoring would be a good way, because not only am I helping the actual lawyers with improving their performance and productivity, but that also has a flow-on effect of helping consumers. So I'm tackling it and impacting from a cultural level, if you like, so that the quality of legal services can improve to consumers. So I see it as a bigger picture assistance in terms of the legal community, as well as individual assistance for lawyers with the experience and skills that I gained working for the regulator, and just seeing what their issues, what their challenges are, and areas that they may need assistance with.
Because you would have seen a lot at the Legal Services Board.
Yes.
So you would be able
Definitely.
to implement or help lawyers get to a point where they avoid any issues or complaints against them from clients.
Absolutely, because there are quite a few reasons for complaints, obviously, but there are some key things that lead to complaints against lawyers. So seeing what they are, that made me think, wow, there's something I can assist with here in terms of areas for improvement, for performance and greatest productivity.
What are the key complaints?
I thought that might be the next question. The key reasons for complaints.
Yes.
So look, the number one issue or reason for complaints is costs. So that's probably not surprising to anybody. So, and different things in terms of costs. So it could be high costs, being overbilled. It could be lack of cost disclosure. It could be that the client didn't have their expectations managed in terms of costs. And it could be things like lawyers taking executors' commission and costs in that way when they're not entitled to. So there's lots of different things. So cost is a big thing. But in terms of what lawyers do or don't do that can lead to complaints, and what the main reasons are communication issues. So that's either no communication. So there were definitely files where, lawyers had not communicated for months and months to the client. So eventually they made a complaint. There could be not enough communication, and also communication that the client doesn't understand. So, as lawyers, sometimes we use some complicated legal language. We don't always make sure that the client understands what we're saying. So there's a bit of a disconnect about what they expect. So if you don't communicate in a way that the client understands, that can often lead to complaints because of miscommunication. And the other really key thing that was an issue was delays. So delays in providing advice, delays in giving information to clients, delays in giving them documents. So sometimes people would ring up because, you know, they'd asked for a certificate of title from their lawyer, and they'd asked several times and they'd heard nothing, and the lawyer didn't provide them with anything. And they may need that for some reason. And I think driving some of those, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later in more detail, is stress for lawyers, the stress that they're going through rather than incompetence. But they're really the key reasons why complaints were made.
You touched on communication. What is effective communication from a lawyer's point of view? And how can they be, I suppose, how can they communicate more without over-communicating? What should they do day to day?
That's a really good question. So communication itself is just the transfer of data from one person to another. So thoughts, facts, opinions. But effective communication is the next level, really. So that's more about it being a two-way street. So I think a lot of people in general, and lawyers for sure, think about how they're communicating their message, but they don't necessarily think about how it's going to be received. So effective communication is when you, as the person delivering the message, knows what you want to achieve by delivering that message, and you deliver it in a clear way, that the person that you're delivering the message to, so your client in this instance, let's talk about clients, has actually understood the message the way that it's intended. So you need to make sure of that. So I'll talk about strategies in a moment and how you do that. And then the third part of it is that the intended outcome that you are seeking is actually achieved. So it's a two-way street. You've got to think about how you're delivering your message and how your client is also receiving your message. And I think that there's a bit of a disconnect there sometimes, which is why complaints are made. So what can you do day to day? So, you know, effective communication is one of my pet areas because it's so important to someone's success. So can I touch on that first? So there was actually a study done by the Carnegie Institute of Technology which found that 85% of people's financial success is dependent on their ability to communicate and negotiate, and only 15% on technical skills. So I don't know about your experience with lawyers, but my experience is that, you know, the legal industry in general is very focused on the technical skills. And so that's only 15% of the equation in terms of your financial success. So if you can't communicate effectively, no matter how good a lawyer you are, it's a big issue. So I think more emphasis needs to be put on being able to effectively communicate, and it's something that should really be taught in universities, I believe, because these are practical skills. It's all well and good to learn the theory, but these practical skills that are going to set you up for becoming a successful lawyer are often overlooked. And that's why I feel that my work is so important, because some people are naturally good communicators, but other people have to work on it, and it's a skill that you can learn. So it's important because it saves time and money, because when your message is clear and other people are receiving it the way that it should be, then there's less incidents for misunderstanding, greater productivity, not just with a client-lawyer relationship, but with your colleagues within the law firm even. So it's important to build relationships to be a successful lawyer and to achieve the outcomes that you want. I think in the legal industry, your credibility is also really important. So when you're an effective communicator, I think you're perceived to be a leader and have more credibility, so people are confident that you'll get the results for them. And that's what clients want. Clients want results. And also your reputation is very key in the legal industry, even within the legal fraternity in terms of your peers. So, and also with clients, you want your clients to come back. You want them to refer other people to you. So if you're communicating effectively with them, they're more likely to have that relationship and that rapport with you, come back, refer other people, especially if you're a suburban lawyer or, you know, a sole practitioner, referrals and repeat clients are so important for your success. So back to how you do it. There's lots of things, and you can probably tell from how I'm talking that I could talk about it all day because I run whole day workshops just on communication. But I think one key thing to remember, and people always seem to be a bit surprised about this breakdown in communication, and I'm not sure if you know it, Louise, but do you know the percentage of words, body language, voice tone that...
I think I do, but go ahead. You
Do you want to have a guess?
No, you can go. No.
So your words, and you know, we're so focused on words as lawyers,
Yeah.
like, this is our bread and butter. Your words are only 7% of communication. A body language is 55%. So, you know, posture, and I'm trying to sit up straight today. Posture, gestures, facial expressions, all of that is 55% of your communication. And your voice tonality is 38%. So that's your, you know, pitch, volume, the speed at which you talk, all of that. So does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't.
That's good. It might surprise some other people watching this though.
I think it would, especially because words are only 7%. And they don't factor in the other
That's right.
aspects, tone and body language, into it. But how does a lawyer know if they're communicating effectively?
Well, hopefully they're going to, the message that they give out or the message that they intend to convey to somebody, the purpose of that is actually achieved. So that's what you're hoping for. So in terms of how do you do it, how do you communicate effectively and make sure that purpose is being achieved and that the recipient's understanding the message that you intend, one thing to do is make sure that you get feedback from the person that you're communicating with. So, you know, something like, was it clear what I said to you? So if you're trying to manage a client's expectations from the beginning and let them know what a likely result might be, and that's what you're trying to communicate, asking for feedback and making sure that they paraphrase back to you to ensure that they got the message would be really important. So that's one thing you can do. Even though words are only 7%, they're still really important. So it's important to be conscious of the language that you're using and also the way that you deliver your message verbally. So in terms of the language you're using, think about how do you want to be perceived as a lawyer and as an effective communicator. You want to be perceived as a leader. So you need to be using leadership language. Language like yes, no, I'll do it, definitely, rather than I'll try, maybe, if. So imagine if you said to a client, yes, I can do that advice for you and it's definitely going to go out at the end of the day, you'll receive it. As opposed to, I'll try and do that advice for you, maybe I can get it done, I have a lot on, if I can't get it done, I may let you know. So you can see the disconnect there and how you would be perceived. So in terms of your verbal delivery, also important to keep it simple, because a client coming to you for legal advice at times can be emotional or confused. So you need to keep it simple and try not to use too much legal jargon. We're all guilty of that. And I know that when I was working for the regulator, if someone had walked into one of our meetings from outside, they would not have understood what we were talking about because, you know, acronyms for everything. So just be mindful that you're using simple language that the other person can understand, because this is going to reduce your risk of complaints as well as increase the ability for that message to land. So words are important. Like I said though, you've got to look at more than just the words. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So this is about your body language. So you need to be mindful of both your own body language as well as looking at the other person and looking to their body language, because there are obvious signs of distress, or you can often tell if you're focusing in on the other person what they're going through or what they're feeling. So it's important to be mindful of not just the message you're conveying, but what reaction you're getting. And I think just having an awareness of that is key. And obviously there's a lot of things we can do, and I don't have time to talk about them all today, but just having that awareness. And having an awareness that the words that you're saying need to be in alignment with your body language and your voice tone, because you can look like you're interested in a client and you're speaking to them, but if your body language is like this out towards the door, you look pretty disinterested, and the client's automatically going to sense a disconnect, and that makes you less trustworthy and breaks rapport. And rapport is another important thing I wanted to touch on in terms of communicating effectively. So really important to develop rapport with your client and with any other person that you're communicating with. So what do I mean by that? Do you want to have a go?
No, you can go.
No, you
You're
sure?
the expert.
You sure you don't want to have a go?
I'm leaving it to the expert.
So you know when you meet someone and you just click,
Yeah.
right? So that's natural rapport, but you're not going to click with everyone. So you want to be able to create it. So rapport is just about either finding or creating common ground so that there's some sort of connection. So it's about connecting. And it's important because people like people that are like them. So if you're creating common ground, then someone's more likely to listen to you. And one way to develop rapport, and people will be looking at the video now and having a look, is matching and mirroring the body language or words or voice tone of the person that you're talking to. So you'll see now I've got my legs crossed and my hands in the same position as you. So it needs to be subtle though, not creepy or stalkery, because you can take it too far. But if you just subtly, mirror them, there's an automatic rapport that develops, and even with your voice. So sometimes you're going to be on a telephone conversation, or be having a telephone conversation, I should say, with a client or with another lawyer. So think about it, 55% of your communication is wiped out. So you're relying on 38% voice and 7% words. So you want to be developing rapport. So if the other person that you're talking to is a low talker or a slow talker and you're high pitched and fast, you want to try and modify it a bit so that you match, because you're going to develop that rapport. The only time you want to mismatch is if you're talking to a hostile or emotional client. Then you want to do the opposite to what they're doing. So that's important. And the other way of developing rapport, and I think it's important to be a successful lawyer as well, is having empathy. So I think there's a big move towards empathy generally, culturally, in a lot of professions. The legal profession maybe is a little bit behind in the empathy stakes, but I think it's becoming more and more important and thought of at the forefront. So empathy, again, it's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and seeing it from their perspective. So if you display empathy towards your client or towards somebody else, even if you're not in agreement, the important thing in terms of being able to effectively communicate and your message to land is to remember that every single person on this earth wants to be validated, heard, acknowledged and understood. So if you do that with your client, it's a really good first step towards developing rapport and towards your message and your communication being more effective. And like I said, there's a lot more, but one other thing is around preparation. So being prepared is so crucial, and it might sound like 101, but we live a really busy life and we dash from one meeting to the next, and maybe when that happens, preparation sort of falls by the wayside and you think, oh, I'm just going to wing it in this meeting. We've all done that. So if you're prepared, especially when you're going to have a difficult conversation potentially, much more likely that you're going to communicate effectively. So you want to be thinking about what questions or what objections or any feedback that the other person might have that you can preempt, so that you can at least be prepared for that and put yourself on the front foot. You want to be writing things down so that you know what you're going to say and it crystallises it in your mind. The other thing is you want to be thinking about and be on the front foot about what the appropriate medium is to deliver the communication. So is it email? Is it by telephone? Is it face-to-face? So if it's going to be a difficult conversation, email is probably not the best way to communicate, because you're on 7% with words, and with email and with no tone, I reckon you're on 3% at best.
I think less. It could be interpreted any which way.
I did say at best. So you have to, you need to be mindful of that, because that's going to determine the impact of the message potentially. So what's the best way? I think face-to-face is often the best way if it's a bit more difficult. On the phone, just be mindful of the fact you've got body language wiped out, so you may need to employ some other of the communication tactics that I've mentioned. But the other preparation aspect is if there's other people involved with the delivery of the message, like if you're a lawyer and there's a barrister involved, you want to make sure that you're on the same page, because I've seen complaints happen because the barrister and the solicitor have been saying different things to the client, and the client's confused. So
I could see where that could go wrong. Now, you touched on stress being an impact of lawyers receiving complaints.
yes, definitely.
Talk me through stress and how we manage stress. First of all, how do we identify that we're stressed?
Yep.
And secondly, how do we actually manage those stress levels so it doesn't impact on our performance as a lawyer?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because I'm sure you'd know the statistics are that 33% of lawyers are stressed, depressed and anxious. So that's pretty huge. So I think managing stress really is one of the keys to your success as a lawyer long term, if you want it to be sustainable over time. Obviously, a lot of people do law for a little while and then move on to something else. But if you want to be a successful lawyer, you need to be able to manage the stress levels. And it's not easy, because it's an inherently stressful profession. We're dealing with people, we're dealing with problems, we're dealing with a large volume of work often, and complicated work. So really important to self-care, and I don't know that lawyers do that all that well. So again, this is why one of the key areas that I work in is managing stress, because I think it is critical to, as I said, not only being a successful lawyer and it being sustainable, but your health and well-being is number one. If you're stressed out, you're compromising the quality of the legal services that you're providing potentially to the client, and not just compromising your own health and well-being. So there's far-reaching implications and ramifications. So how do you identify when you're stressed? And I think this is the very first step of being aware when you're stressed and what your triggers are. So you need to be monitoring at all times and be aware of how you are physically from a health perspective, because it manifests physiologically, obviously, not just mentally. So think about what your own signs of stress are, because you need to be recognising when you're stressed before you can do anything about it. So do you have anxiety? Do you have a feeling in your stomach? Are you getting headaches? Are you not sleeping well? Do you have clenched fists often? Are you sweaty? Does your heart race? All these, and everyone's got different symptoms. Like for me, when I'm stressed out, my heart races and I feel sick, in the pit of my stomach. but for other people it's different things. So you need to be constantly monitoring yourself and your own levels of well-being. And it is a huge responsibility that you have to yourself, but like I said, it's not just for yourself, it's got far-reaching implications. So first of all, know what your stress symptoms are. Second of all, you need to be identifying what triggers the stress. And so what you need to do is you need to be assessing what's going on around you, and you need to be looking at your habits, your attitudes and your excuses, because that's often going to reveal what triggers you. So people get stressed about work deadlines, right? I think we all get stressed about that. But it may not be the work deadlines that are actually stressing you out. It may be that you're a procrastinator and you don't manage your time effectively, and that's what's stressing you out. So you need to look at what it actually is that triggers you. So recommend, and this is an interesting exercise for everyone to do anyway, is to keep a journal for a week of the times that you're stressed and what it is that's stressing you out. So if you do that, I think it is a really fascinating exercise to see what actually does stress you out, and good luck to you if there's nothing in that week, but I guarantee that there will have been something that will have created at least minor amounts of stress, because that's just an inherent part of our role. So identifying what your symptoms of stress are and also your triggers are the first thing you can do to manage stress, because you need to have that awareness. So did you ask me what to do?
What to do?
What to do?
What do we do? So we've identified our stress levels and when we're stressed.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do? How do we manage them?
$1 million question, like I said before. Look, it's different for everyone, and everyone's heard a little bit of stress is important because it motivates you to meet deadlines and to be productive, but it's when stress turns into distress or overwhelm that you need to do something about it. So the really simple foundation, if you like, of stress management is to be aware and to realise that you are actually in control. So you're in control of your thoughts, you're in control of your habits, you're in control of the way you solve problems and the way you look at things. So that's the starting point. And I know when you're stressed, you have that feeling of overwhelm and being out of control. But you need to remind yourself that it is within your control. So one really important thing that I'm sure we'll touch on later, so I won't go into it in depth, is around managing time. Time management and good time management is a really key way to reduce your stress levels, because you've got control over your time. Everyone's got 24 hours in a day, but how you use it is, within your control and within your choice. So good time management, really important to managing stress. I think I mentioned self-care before, and that lawyers maybe don't do that well. So that could mean different things to different people. So I think regular breaks and regular downtime is a given. And part of the issue with our society is that's a major cause of stress, is the culture of 24/7 connection and the glorification of busy. So, we might go home, but we're still connected to our emails and our phones. I mean, I know I answer emails at all times of the night. You sort of have to when you run your own business. But even if you work in a large law firm, you work across different time zones, you're expected to always be connected. So at some point, you do have to disconnect. And what I like to call it is disconnect to reconnect. Okay. So it's, disconnect so that you can reconnect with the people around you, your loved ones, with nature, with taking regular breaks is really critical. And if you must check your phone when you're on holidays, at least give yourself, say, half an hour at the beginning of the day and half an hour at the end of the day. Like, give yourself allocated time, don't check it throughout the day, because that's what we do. Another really critical thing that you can do to manage stress, and again, I think perhaps lawyers don't do it all that well because we are type A personalities traditionally, which is why we go into law, is asking for help. So there are so many ways you can ask for help. So I think the three ways that I can think of off the top of my head in terms of asking for help, or the three areas, is your personal support network. So think about who's in your personal support network, and this is your loved ones, your friends, anyone that you can look forward to spending time with that's going to help you and support you in times of stress. So it's really important to have people to lean on. So your personal network, your professional network. So I haven't mentioned this earlier, but one of the key, the main demographic in terms of lawyers who complaints are received against is middle-aged male sole practitioners out in the suburbs. And there are lots of reasons for that, but the key reasons are that they try to wear too many hats. And so, you know, they're on their own, and they're not just providing legal services, but they're doing the marketing. Sometimes they're doing the admin, they're doing the trust recording, they're trying to bring in clients. So you've got all these other stresses of running a business on your own, and often they can also feel isolated. So if you're a sole practitioner, or even if you're not, really great to get out there and network and meet other lawyers that you can bounce ideas off, find a mentor, ally yourself with complementary professions, so like accountants and tax agents, depending on what kind of law you do. You can create your own network, so you have a professional support network. I think that's really important to mental health, and also to assisting with running a practice, particularly if you've got a sole practice. And the third, kind of related to that, is outsourcing to experts in the field. So for example, not trying to do the trust recording yourself, but having a bookkeeper if you can, even if it's only one day a week. I've seen so many instances where people have lawyers have committed trust account breaches, and complaints have been made because they didn't have time to do the trust account recording properly. And then they're stressed out, wearing all these hats. It's impacting on mental health. It's jeopardising the quality of your legal services. And asking for help, you can go to the LIV. They've got a 24-hour hotline. You can go to any of the legal regulators, the board or the commissioner, for assistance, the LPLC. I think it's really important to remember that there are places you can go to for help if you need to, and if you are suffering from mental health issues or stress. So that's another important thing. Delegating where you can is also a source of stress reduction. And even simple things in your personal life, like creating positive rituals that you have something to look forward to. So, you know, it might be that you enjoy running, so you go running either on your own or with a friend a couple of times a week, or dinner with your partner, date night, or something that you have as an outlet that you can create as a ritual every week. Because when you've got that certainty in your life and you've got the positive things to look forward to, that reduces stress. And, you know, other simple little hacks are look at the physical environment that you work in. I've worked with people before whose desks were so unbelievably messy that stresses you out. It was stressing me out. So, you know, try to clean your desk at night. And, you know, sometimes people...
I've seen those desks.
Yeah. And I've actually spoken to, you know, a certain person that had a desk like that, and they said to me, "But Amy, I know where everything is." So I think if you know where everything is, it's okay. But, you know, organised chaos. But generally speaking, if your desk is like that, I mentored a lawyer, a younger lawyer, when I was working at the Legal Services Board as part of VCAT order. And when I saw his desk, I just thought, I'm not going to say his name, but X, what is going on here? How do you even find anything? And I said to him, why don't you do an in-tray for yourself and see how that works? And next time I went, he was using the in-tray, and it's just these simple things that can actually make a huge difference.
And you don't lose things.
Yes.
I mean,
underneath the piles and missed deadlines,
Correct. Because things get lost, misplaced.
They do. And so when you're stressed and you're racing all over the shop and you've got a desk like that, this is what I mean about jeopardising the quality of legal services that you provide. Not just because your mental health is suffering, and obviously when your mental health is compromised, you're not at the peak performance required to be, to provide the legal services at a standard that you should be.
Yeah. Now, time management has a lot to do also with stress, communicating effectively,
yes,
and
it does.
Avoiding complaints. And we all think we're managing our time well, but sometimes we don't. What should people be doing to manage their time more effectively so that things just work much better during their day?
I wonder if I'm managing my time well in this interview. I'm always trying to make sure that happens when I'm running my workshops and having conversations like these. So what does effective time management mean or look like, first of all, I think? And there's a few different definitions of effective time management. So like I said earlier, we've all got 24 hours in a day, and it's within our control as to how we manage that. So effective time management simply is the ability to use your time efficiently and productively. So what does that mean? And also developing systems and processes for that to happen. But that's twofold. So I want to talk about mindset a little bit, as well as systems and processes. But in terms of effective time management, I think other than using your time effectively and productively, the other definitions that I quite like are making sure that you allocate the right time to the right activity. Because sometimes we're taking way too long to do something, like check Facebook. Yeah. And not allocating the time to another activity, like making that phone call we're putting off to a client. And also it's not just about managing time, but it's about managing your energy. So it's about managing your energy so that you're putting it towards where the direct benefits are going to be. But my favourite one is managing your time so that you waste less time on doing the things that you don't want to do and have more time to spend on the things you do want to do. So they're really, that's what effective time management it is. And I think the goal is to achieve life balance, or how you want your life to look like, because it's different for everyone. So essentially you need to think about what your priorities are and whether you're achieving them in the time that you've got. So it's about achieving your intended outcomes within your desired time frames. I think that's what it looks like. What it looks like in reality or in practice. But when people think of time management, I think that they think of systems and processes associated with it rather than maybe the mindset. Yeah. So are you happy for me to talk about the mindset?
You speak about it in your workshops, and you go into depth about mindset. So please share us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the two aspects, as I said, that I see to time management is mindset and the actual systems and processes that you're going to put in place. Yeah. So you need to get the mindset around managing your time right first before you can put systems in place. I think people rush to put systems in place or processes in place without thinking about what effective time management looks for them, what it looks like for them. So there's a lot of little mindset shifts. So it's all about looking at your priorities and values and what you want to achieve in the time that you've got every day. Yeah. looking at what your strengths and challenges are around time management, because that's all part of mindset. And I think everybody runs around thinking, oh, I don't have enough time for this. One mindset shift that I'd like to share is that you don't actually find time, you make time. So you're going to make time for whatever you prioritise. So when you're telling people, I'm too busy for you, you're essentially saying to them, I don't prioritise you. So I'm too busy for this. It's not a priority. So prioritisation and planning are a really big part of time management, because you've got to make time. So it's about being proactive rather than reactive. I think as lawyers, we tend to be very reactive. It's a reactive kind of profession. You know, clients come, here's my problem, and you look for the solution. So, you know, in the course of a day, you might have a nice to-do list, and that is a really good tool, and I'll talk about that a little more later. You might have a really nice to-do list, but that can get completely derailed by someone calling and saying, I've got an urgent matter, please help. So it's about making time, not finding time. That's one thing. Another thing I think that's really important is that moving the focus from being busy to actually spending time on the right activities. So I think people do a lot of busy work in their day, but is that actually achieving what they want to achieve? So there needs to be a shift in focus from activities to results. And there's a principle called the Pareto Principle. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't heard this one.
So it's also known as the 80-20 rule.
Okay.
Do you know that?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So 20% of what you do yields 80% of your results. So you need to look at, what am I doing that's going to yield the results that the results that I want. The other mindset thing to think about is, think about who you need to be an efficient and effective time manager. So who do you think you would need to be? Like some traits that you would need to possess.
I don't know. Share.
Share away.
Share away.
Being organised. So again, this comes back to the messy desk.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a messy desk and you're spending time rummaging through looking for that one document that you need for the client that's coming in, you know, in an hour, that time that you're spending rummaging through, if you knew where it was, automatically there, you've shaved off, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long it takes. And it's these little time increments add up when you're wasting time.
They do.
So think about who you want to be. You want to be organised. You want to be focused. You want to know what your goals, values and priorities are.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about mindset, just being aware that you also need to know about what your strengths are in terms of managing time and what your challenges are.
Yeah.
So, you know, some people might be really good at managing time within a meeting, for example, but their challenge is that they try to cram too much in one day. So one of the tools that I'll talk about is scheduling.
Yeah.
And one of the things about scheduling is that I always say never schedule back-to-back meetings without a break in between, because you need that cushion. Because meetings, you always underestimate how long a meeting is going to go for.
Right.
And then you're out for the rest of the day. And then that happens, and then you get stressed. So you see, it's all interrelated. And then when you're stressed and trying to, you know, manage the time that you've got left, you're potentially not going to communicate as effectively as you can.
I'm just going to come back to complaints.
Correct.
So it's this big.
Yeah. So you can see though how all these areas, even though they're standalone, and I do work and run workshops standalone in those areas, they're very interconnected. So I do run a 3-hour workshop on those 3 areas because they are so interconnected, and I think they're important.
Yeah. Now, tools. What can lawyers do to implement for time management? If you could give us top 3. they need to do?
3, just 3.
Just 3.
So,
How many are there?
Oh, there's a lot. Do you mean specific, say, apps or things to do? Because
We'll focus on things to do.
Yeah, let's focus on things to do. So, file management is really critical in terms of time management. So, you can't imagine how many places I've gone into, because I was at the regulator for 8 years. So, I've gone into a lot of law practices that don't have proper file management systems, be it electronic or manual, it doesn't matter. But, you need to have systems around dates, deadlines. There are some areas, obviously, that lend themselves better to having systems. Like with conveyancing, I've seen, great things like having a cover sheet and having each stage on there and a checklist. If you can do that in your area of law, that's really great. Lists are good if they work for you. For some people, lists can be overwhelming rather than a positive thing. So this is why I say to you that mindset's really important, and recognising what your own strengths and challenges are, because the tools that you choose to implement have to mirror what your strengths are and address what your challenges are. So if you're a list person, planning and lists is a great great tools to implement into time management. So in terms of planning, what I do every week is on a Sunday night, I set aside 30 minutes and I have a look to see what my calendar looks like for the next week and what really needs to get done, like what the priorities are, and just plan and take stock, because you can hit the ground running on Monday morning. Doing a list the day before you leave the office, just spending 15 minutes and doing a list for the next day is also a good tool, because again, you're hitting the ground running in the morning. And obviously it could change throughout the day, but as long as you have that list. And with the list, I like to make a master list of a few items and then have top 3 priorities for the day, because otherwise it's too overwhelming. You don't want to stress yourself out.
Because then you'll get stressed over the list.
Exactly. So the whole reason for what you're doing is trying to minimise stress and manage your time better. So a top 3 priority list, if you can, is a good way to do it. Have you heard of Eat the Frog?
No.
I like to introduce this concept around time management because I find it really fascinating. But Brian Tracy is a well-known coach, and he uses the concept of Eat the Frog to deal with procrastination. And I think a lot of us are procrastinators, and that really, I know I have been in the past, but I have to walk my walk and talk as well as talk my talk now, so I'm a lot better. But a lot of people are procrastinators, and that impacts on the amount of work you get done, the quality of the services, your stress levels. So again, it's all tied in. So Brian Tracy says that you need to eat the frog first thing in the morning. So what you need to do is you need to do the ugliest thing on your list first thing in the morning, because then you feel better for the rest of the day. Do you like that one?
I like it. Although I was picturing Pareto frog, like eat the frog. So I would have
Picture Pareto frog, if you like. That might be, a useful association for some people. But yeah, it's a good tool because, we always put the things we put in the too hard basket. If you make that phone call first thing, you're not stressing about it and it's not hanging over your head for the rest of the day. So if you do have a problem with procrastination, the other really good technique, and I like to use it for time management generally, is the Pomodoro Technique. Do you know that?
No, I don't know this one.
Oh, I'm giving away a lot of secrets.
You are giving
today.
away a lot of
secrets. So the Pomodoro Technique was created by Mr. Pomodoro, which is Italian for tomato. You would know, right? And what it is you need to, if you're having trouble starting something, like if you're having trouble drafting something, and we all have issues with it sometimes, You set the timer or whatever on your phone, you can do it discreetly, for 25 minutes, work for 25 minutes solidly on that task and do nothing else, and then have a 5-minute break, and that's called a Pomodoro, the 25-minute, and then start it again. So do 4 of those with 5-minute breaks. Really good for drafting, because you're in the zone and you make sure that you don't get disturbed. Now, you probably can't do that in every workplace, but you're going to be able to adapt some form of that. So if you're on Do Not Disturb on your phone, or don't look at any emails for that 25 minutes, that gets you focused and in the zone, and you actually get a lot done. And then you have a 5-minute break, and then you do another Pomodoro, and then another 5-minute break and another 2 of those, and then you have a longer break. Okay. So that's a good technique for procrastination. And I'm sure that's really important to a lot of people watching this video, because we all have an element of that. Right. As I said earlier though, another top tool is around scheduling and using your diaries. So you wouldn't imagine the number of people when I run these workshops that put their hand up when I say, hands up if you don't have a diary of any form, which is concerning, because how are they organising their appointments in their day? So scheduling your day is really critical, and scheduling everything. So scheduling in deadlines so that you don't miss deadlines. And this goes back to good file management. Using a calendar or a diary. It doesn't matter if it's a paper diary. I quite like a paper diary. That's what I use. I know a lot of people use Outlook, also effective. But again, it's very personal to you. So you need to use whatever suits you. But schedule deadlines, schedule phone calls. And a good thing to do is, if you've got a number of phone calls to make, batch them. So I know in terms of when I do things better, so think about what works for you in terms of productivity. I'm a better drafter in the morning. And then, so I do anything, any hard stuff or any letters or advices or anything like that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I batch phone calls. So I slot in, a couple of hours in my calendar for phone calls after lunch when you're feeling a bit food coma-ish and, not able to do drafting as well potentially. That's my own timing. But you look at the times of day that you work best and use that for your scheduling and what you schedule as well.
And you could also keep a journal on what works well for you. You touched on keep a journal for stress for the week.
Yeah.
Keeping the journal for when you're performing best and what
Exactly. And on that point, in terms of calendar and journal, before you even think about implementing systems and processes around managing your time, you need to actually look at where your time leaks are. So this is like a pre-assessment before you work out your strategies. So you want to look at the week before and see what you've spent time on to see what's eating up your time. So it could be, like I said before about Facebook, being on Facebook for too long, or something else that's eating up your time that could be better spent and more productively spent. And checking your email all the time, just as an aside, we feel like we need to do that, but the impact on productivity is unbelievable, because I'm not sure if you know, but when you look at an email, say you're in the middle of drafting something and you look, the little letter comes up, or you get the ping or whatever it is, and you look at it, it actually takes you about 20 minutes to get back into whatever you were doing. So if you're looking at emails, if you're being reactive rather than proactive around your time, you chew up a lot of time. So not everyone can do this. I understand that some lawyers are in areas where there's urgency around what they do. But for my business, for example, I look at emails first thing in the morning, lunchtime, and at the end of the day. And that could be enough depending on your practice.
They are very helpful tips.
So a lot of little hacks.
No, thank you.
I've got loads more.
I'm sure you do. We'll have
time is of the essence.
That is wonderful, Amy. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. And if people want more information, how do they get in touch with you?
Best way is to connect with me through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
send me a LinkedIn message. My business is called Inspire to Success, but they can look me up on LinkedIn. I do have a website, but it's under construction at the moment.
Okay.
So LinkedIn at the moment is probably the best way to connect with
They
me.
can reach out to us.
Great, yeah, that would be
We'll
excellent.
That is all for now, but don't fear, as I'll be back next week speaking to more incredible people within the profession. As always, thank you for watching and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more.